We seem to have had a very odd situation within which the advice of our Director of Public Health was that face coverings should not take place in schools, and that position altered during the course of the middle of the week with the Chief Minister before he left for London, examining the position, saying that each school will have to determine its own decision in relation to face masks. And then we had this stark position by Professor Cortes towards the end of the week on saying, well, they should be seriously recommended. So the position has fluctuated during the week, and we've been very clear and very critical of the government for sending those mixed messages to our community. And I think the people would like clarity. They would like less confusion on this issue. And still to this day, when we walk up and down Main Street, we see a very disparate number of people not wearing masks or wearing masks, and the message being delivered to the people of our community must be consistent, bearing in mind, of course, it is always a dynamic situation.
Well, what's the GSD's position on mask wearing in schools then? Do you agree with the government's decision that they should be worn in common areas?
Well, of course, every single political party in Gibraltar should be guided by the medical evidence, the scientific evidence throughout all of this. Now, if the government are saying to the people of Gibraltar that we are seriously recommending the use of face coverings and masks within areas in which children congregate, of course that would be supported by the GSD. Of course, where large numbers and groupings of individuals are collating in one area, such as a corridor or an open space in the context of a school, if the guidance has now changed from the Director of Public Health positions that no masks are to be worn to now the position that they should seriously be recommended in areas, personally I think is absolutely logical. Where children are gathering together in areas where there would be increased risk, then therefore that should be recommended, and we would support that, yes.
Can I ask you, what's your understanding of public covered spaces? You've seen the legislation. Is that clear to you?
Well, the legislation, I read it, and certainly one of the questions that popped into my mind, of course, were workers and people in offices. And some offices aren't particularly open, as it were, to the public. Clearly, there's a clause within the legislation whether you are invited to enter a building on fee or otherwise, that they would be captured by this legislation. I think that the legislation needs to be clearer, or at least the government needs to make a public announcement as to when people will be expected to wear coverings and not to wear coverings or masks within our community. I don't think the legislation is entirely clear. I think there is still some confusion, and therefore I think people of our community and these businesses and people that go about their daily business should be given further guidance as to how we use them, and in particular the methodology. I know that the GHA came out with a 3-layer principle insofar as masks are concerned, but there may well be masks on the market that may not comply with that. So of course there needs to be some enforcement as to these masks coming onto the streets and being sold to members of the public. So I think more guidance and better guidance from the government is required on this area.
Dr. Cortes told GBC that curriculum-based online learning for students who are either self-isolating or should there be another lockdown, that is a work in progress. What's your thoughts on that?
I must say I'm very disappointed to learn the news that we do not have in place the ability to educate our children in a further lockdown situation. God forbid that should happen. But also think about the other circumstances within which children will need to learn, i.e. self-isolation, children who actually contract COVID, children whose parents are in a situation where they're vulnerable, their grandparents are vulnerable. How is it not possible since February or March of this year that we do not have in place a position where we can remotely teach our children? I really do not understand that. I'm hugely disappointed. What we need to see is a clear remote educational program that can be deployed to children in those eventualities.